Over in Marvel Comics' main Amazing Spider Man universe, the publisher is exploring what led to the breakup between Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And it all has to do with the mysterious Mayan god wayep who managed to trap Peter and Mary in an alternate dimension. Thankfully, Peter was able to escape over in the last issue of The Amazing Spider Man, but his love interest, Mary Jane, is now trapped. My name is Arako Braddock, and today let's go ahead and explore The Amazing Spider-Man number 23 to see if Peter is able to save Mary and if we can finally get the answer on what exactly Peter did to alienate so much of his friends and which caused the sort of, dissolution of Peter and Mary's relationship. But before we dive deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And I want to kick things off here by introducing this new issue of The Amazing Spider-Man with Marvel's solicitation text for the issue. What did Peter do? We open the series with the question. The centerpiece of the answer is a flat-out fight. I want to go ahead and read off our creative team behind Spider-Man 23. This one is written by Zeb Wells, featuring artwork over from John Romita Jr., inks from Scott Hanna, colors from Marcio Menyz, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna, and plus the cover of the issue is coming from John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Marcio Menyz. Here's a look over for the cover of The Amazing Spider-Man number 23. Really enjoy the way that John Romita Jr. frames Spider-Man in particular on this cover, from basically his backside. And also, I do like the introduction of the rest of the Fantastic Four characters over on the cover as well. And I want to give Adventures in Poor Taste a quick thank you for posting these previews of the issues so incredibly quickly. And I want to talk a little bit about John Romita Jr.'s contributions to The Amazing Spider-Man 23. So in the past, I've been a little bit hot and cold on John Romita Jr.'s artwork, depending on which issue of The Amazing Spider-Man we're looking at. Thankfully, I think this one plays to his strengths, as the Marvel Universe is kind of introducing some larger characters for him to draw over from writer Zeb Wells in the issue. And with Peter Parker on the run, we're mostly focused on just Peter in general. And I think this gives Romita Jr. the chance to draw sort of big, blocky panels that are able to kind of, characterize so much emotion from the individual characters and play into some of his strengths as a creator a little bit. Peter Parker just recently got banged up a little bit from some fights in the last issue of Amazing Spider-Man, so getting his kind of, contorted face over from the bruises is a really fascinating way to go ahead and get John Romita Jr. the opportunity to draw a little bit more personality over on Peter's face in the issue. I think John Romita Jr. is really fantastic at sort of characterizing the new relationship over with Peter and Norman, and is able to capture so much sort of subtext through characters' emotions whenever Peter and Norman are talking in the issue. So love some of the contributions there. And I also enjoyed the fact that the issue got to play up John Romita Jr.'s strengths by not focusing on just such a large array of characters over for the title. I want to talk a little bit about some of the writing in the issue. I really enjoyed how the stakes are so high in this chapter of The Amazing Spider-Man as Peter Parker is trying to desperately save Mary Jane from this sort of alternate dimension where he was stuck in. And I actually found that even though I was a little bit frustrated with previous issues, I was so intrigued at the fact that Zeb Wells is kind of going in and inserting a little bit more character dynamics into this missing period of time. In fact, I think this is actually going to make some older issues of The Amazing Spider-Man read a little bit better, because we now have some of that context that we were missing over from previous issues due to this just being a flashback of an event. I really think that Zeb Wells carefully introduces some additional superheroes over in the Marvel Universe, and I really like kind of Peter's interaction over with the Fantastic Four. I think Peter actually does something a little bit out of character a little bit later on in the issue where he attacks a kind of Marvel Universe character, which I think is going to be very controversial and doesn't tell us exactly what Peter Parker did to cause, of course, the dissolution between him and Mary's relationship, but it at least gives some clues on maybe what led to kind of, this big status quo reveal. And also, it shows just how desperate kind of Peter is in the first place for the story. But of course, I really appreciate the fact that Zeb Wells kind of capitalizes on this, status quo shift and really desperate look for Peter by using it to advance one of the relationships that's been kind of so instrumental to his run. I feel like we got a sort of great tease at this when we knew that Ben Reilly was kind of, staging Dark Web over in The Amazing Spider-Man, but we didn't know what some of his motivations were until the 14th issue of that series. And I think Zeb Wells does such a great job in terms of some of the individual kind of character pacing in the story. And while I do think that this leads to one of my kind of core problems of the issue, which is just essentially Spider-Man being too violent, I do think that there's at least some characterization and some reasoning for him to sort of, make this out of character split second decision that he does. And I also think that, Peter is going to be paying for it over in some later issues of the series. And I definitely know that Zeb Wells isn't going to let Peter off the hook over for some of his previous actions in the comic book. I just think that Zeb Wells has finally managed to kind of find a groove with the story now that he's been utilizing some of the lost time over in these Spider-Man issues to kind of advance these character relationships. And it'll make going back to some of the older issues of the series really fascinating for eagle-eyed readers of this comic book. So overall, I think The Amazing Spider-Man 23 is an actually pretty solid issue of the series. As long as you're okay with the idea that Zeb Wells is not yet ready to reveal the final answer on what happened with Peter and Mary, if you are a core reader of the main Amazing Spider-Man series, I think you're really going to find some interesting new plot developments in the series that's going to go back and make reading previous issues of the series even more enticing and interesting. I really appreciate all of the sort of plotting and intricate relationships there are over from Zeb Wells in this current Amazing Spider-Man series. I also love that those big battles that John Romita Jr. was able to draw over in this issue as well. I want to know from you, were you intrigued by some of these sort of nuanced character relationships in the Amazing Spider-Man number 23? Are you okay with not knowing about what directly led to the sort of breakup between Peter and Mary? And what do you want me to go ahead and cover next? Well, I want to thank you guys one last time for coming to check out our video review on The Amazing Spider-Man number 23. And we'll be back really soon for more excellent comic book content. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.